In the name of the one holy and undivided Trinity.
Amen.
God spoke all these words. So begins the 20th chapter of the book Exodus, better known as the Decalogue, and even better known as the Ten Commandments. Now, most of us have heard these since childhood, although I'd be interested to know how many people can list them all without a little help. I won't test you. We've perhaps seen them displayed on the walls of churches, maybe even in a courthouse. We've heard jokes about them. Maybe we've even quoted one from time to time. But how often have we sat with them and meditated upon them and their role in our life? Our catechism in the back of the Book of Common Prayer asks the question, what do we learn from these commandments? And the answer that is given is we learn two things. Anybody know what the two things we learn about the commandments are? Oh, Carol knows. I know she was at 8 o'clock. Tell us, Carol.
Love God and love your neighbor.
Correct. And she, not because she was 8 o'clock, she yelled it out. She knew. Our duty towards God and our duty towards our neighbor. The first 4 commandments outline our relationship with God. You shall have no other gods before me. You shall not make for yourself any idol. You shall not take the name of the Lord your God in vain. And remember the Sabbath day and keep it holy. And the last 6 commandments focus on that relationship in terms of our neighbor. You shall do no murder. You shall do no murder. You shall not commit adultery. You shall not steal. You shall not bear a false witness against your neighbor. And you shall not covet. Now, so these commandments, at their very basic, have a personal dimension, me and God, and a social dimension, me and neighbor. But in terms of the question, what do we learn from these commandments? Well, we learn a hell of a lot. And you can focus on these in all kind of different aspects, but being that we're in the middle of Lent, where we pay a little more attention to our own spiritual growth and maturation, I'd like to take a look at these commandments vis-a-vis the spiritual journey towards perfection. Now, we all know none of us reach perfection this side of the grave, but it doesn't mean that we don't aim for it, that we don't keep our eyes fixed on it and move towards it. And the classical path towards perfection in the Christian tradition has been seen as a 3-part journey, which begins in purification and includes illumination and sanctification. And in fact, we're reminded of this because on Wednesday night when we do our Lenten study program with soup and supper, we always start at 5:30 having the meditation labyrinth available in the Lady Chapel back there where the choir sings. And this is the first time we've been able to put that back there because we had to remove the altar rails to make it fit, but it fits perfectly and it's just sort of nestled in that sacred space. There's no right and wrong way to use the labyrinth as a meditation tool, but again, one of the classical ways is to approach it in terms of this 3-part journey, so that our walking into the labyrinth towards the center can be seen as the way of purification. It's a letting go of everything that holds us back, that burdens us. It's getting rid of all the baggage that we carry, the things that separate us from God and neighbor. It's a purging, purification. And then we get to the center of the labyrinth and we pause and we observe a moment of illumination, which at its best is seeing the world as God created it to be. And, more importantly, seeing our place in the created order and our purpose as God intended it to be. And then, after we have received illumination, we can proceed back out the path and see that in terms of sanctification and empowerment to be agents of God's change in the world, to help make the world holy, set apart, just as we have been sanctified. Now, the spiritual journey is a lifelong process, and in real life, it's certainly more fluid than linear, isn't it? We move in and out of purification and illumination. We might take a few steps towards perfection, and then we take double that amount back. I don't know about you, but it can get very frustrating for me, just as I think I'm making some progress. It's like, oh, well, let's start again. And you know, St. Paul struggled with the same thing. Remember when he wrote, "For I do not do the good that I want to do, but the evil that I do not want is the very thing I do." We all struggle with this frustration on the way, the path of purification. And we each have our own path. But none of us have to travel uncharted terrain. And that's where the commandments come in, because they are our guides. Just like a mountain guide provides and checks for first aid provisions and food and maps, so the commandments serve as guides and markers on our journey, which if we pass, we will surely fall. Now, I know there are a lot of this day and age negative feelings about the commandments, the 10 Commandments, any commandment. We don't like them. Especially the 10 Commandments. Oh, they're so negative. All these thou shalt nots, and they're punitive and all this stuff. Well, the purpose of the commandments is not to condemn us, but to protect us, to keep us safe on the journey. Nevertheless, in their violation, pain and havoc always ensue. Always. Pastors' studies and psychiatrists' offices are constantly filled with people who worship another God before God. People who have set up idols for themselves, not of gold and silver statues, but idols of power and prestige, of money, of sex, of alcohol, of drugs. We bow down to these idols and we sacrifice to them big time. And many people have no experience of the presence of God in their lives because they don't even know how to call upon the name of God. And then don't get me started about how our society approaches rest, much less Sabbath rest. We're clueless. I mean, most people think that rest is being busy doing something for which you're not paid. Isn't that, you know, oh, I had a very restful weekend. I went skiing, I took the kids to this, I did that. You know, that's how it works, so it must be rest. And then think about the commandments on our duty towards our neighbor. Our society rewards us for destructiveness. That's what the commandment about murder is about. For unfaithfulness, for satisfying our immediate needs and desires rather than remaining loyal to our commitments. That's what adultery is about. We are rewarded for not getting caught. That's what stealing is about. And for character assassination. That's what every political campaign is about. I mean, no, that's what... That's what bearing false witness is about. And I stand by what I said earlier. And then all of us, since childhood, have been taught not to want the things that we have, but the things that someone else has. Every advertisement we've ever seen is based on the temptation to covet. I gotta have that. So, we are bombarded with these demons to wrestle with every day of our life. And I am certainly aware that reciting the Ten Commandments is not going to solve our problems. But I can't help but think of that wonderful description in the very beginning of the first psalm of the person who meditates on the law of the Lord day and night. It's quite different from the description of most of middle-class America. It says that those people who meditate on the law day and night are like trees planted by streams of living water, bearing fruit in due season with leaves that do not wither. Everything they do shall prosper. And so, these commandments have a lot to teach us. Even today, they are just as relevant to us today as they were to those ancient Hebrews who first heard them. And nevertheless, Jesus' stormy entry into the temple reminds us that as beautiful and as helpful as they can be, we can always pervert them, just as the money changers did. And so Jesus continually calls us to cleanse the temple, this body, to constantly reevaluate how we use these guides and markers in our life. Are they there to keep us safe, to help us along the way, or do we use them as weapons to enforce against others? God spoke all these words. And so, with joy, we recite that Psalm 19 that we heard after the first reading. The law of the Lord is perfect, it revives the soul. The commandments of the Lord are clear and give light to the eyes. But at the same time, we keep our eyes fixed on Jesus and pray the other words of that psalm. Lord, cleanse me from my secret faults. Amen.
Amen.